A strategic alliance is forged between the ASUN and the WAC.
There's been a massive restructuring out west, so we're back on the big mountain to talk about it with a very special guest.
Hey, welcome back to the Big Mountain. I am JY. This is my good friend Steve, and we are bringing on the commissioner of the ASUN conference, Jeff Bacon, to talk about this new strategic alliance that both the ASUN and the WAC will be implementing here in 2026. It is a dramatic change of the landscape in conference realignment. So without further ado, let's get to the discussion. And we have with us Jeff Bacon, the commissioner of the Atlantic Sun Conference. Welcome to the Big Mountain.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you.
Well, we're happy to have you with us. I mean, had some huge news come out last week. We have been following the Western Athletic Conference here for a little while, knowing, they've been losing some members and kind of interested to see what was going on. And then huge news last week, the Atlantic Sun and the Western Athletic Conference are forging this strategic alliance. It starts in July of 2026. So would love to hear from you kind of what that means. And then maybe we'll go back and see if you can give us a little history lesson of how we got here. But I guess to start, like what is this alliance going to be looking like here in 2026?
Well, that's a really good starter question, and we can probably talk about this for about an hour or so if we really want to, and maybe we will. What I'd point out is one, it's an actual alliance and an actual partnership between two conferences that share a heck of a lot in common. Most importantly, the same vision for the future of Division I college athletics at the FCS and Division I level. So, it was forged out of a long-standing relationship between these two conferences by a group of presidents and ADs that shared a similar vision and really knew, we had to figure out a way to work together. I mean, you guys are in this media industry. We talk about this all the time. Why don't these conferences figure it out, and work together and help each other? And those are really hard things to do for myriad reasons I'm sure we'll talk about, but we just had the right set of circumstances at the right time with the right people in the room to finally be able to do something that we think is going to be just, incredibly beneficial to all of the institutions involved in this effort. And I can't, express enough gratitude and thanks to our awesome presidents and our athletic directors and the folks that got behind this vision.
Yeah, so to be clear, we're talking about two separate conferences, and they're going to exist as two separate conferences. Obviously, the Atlantic Sun's going to continue. I believe the Western Athletic Conference is getting rebranded as the United Athletic Conference, and they will be two separate conferences with their own AQ to the tournament and whatnot. So let's talk about if they're separate, what are they actually going to kind of combine? Where is the alliance at there?
Yeah, in all the areas that we have need. And that's a broad way to say, well, I'll get into the detail for you guys, right? So what we're really talking about is a few primary areas of emphasis. One is scheduling. I mean, it has just become more and more difficult year over year for institutions at our level, Tarleton State, Austin Peay, Florida Gulf Coast, I don't really care who you are, at our level, outside of the A4 in particular, to schedule games and to get home games in particular. Right? If you're, and God forbid you're good, then people really don't want to play you, right? And so, we kind of work as conferences independently to form different strategic, scheduling alliances. And you guys have seen multiple iterations of that over the decades, right? They still exist today. This is a cohesively bound together set of two conferences that will schedule collectively. So there will be individual basketball schedules for the UAC and the Atlantic Sun Conference, right? Individual championships, like you guys just said, but we will cross them over. They will play each other. So we have baked in crossover game opportunities for our schools, which is just, again, unheard of. So scheduling is a big part of this. Let's get people games and let's help them get home games. So we've now guaranteed that into the system. The other two big buckets, one is operational savings and efficiencies, right? The more people we put together, the more we can save costs. That applies to college athletics. That applies to, any business in the world for the most part, right? We can combine our resources and reduce our overhead, reduce our expenses, and really be more efficient and nimble at what we do. So that's a big part of this. That's what the consortium will do for both conferences. And then we will generate new revenue. One of the things that at our level, I talk to my presidents, my current presidents, and my soon-to-be presidents, by the way, about is we are fairly limited in our revenue generation capabilities at this level. And so we need to think outside the box of how we can unlock new revenue streams. Now, that means a bunch of things that people are talking about today, capital investment and obviously media rights deals and those kinds of things. But when we combine these two conferences together, our leveraging power in the marketplace doubles. At least we think it does. And we're going to go test that in the marketplace now. We're going to take media rights to a marketplace together. Again, that's never been done in the Division One level. Two conferences taking their media rights out to the market together, brand new, right? Not rocket science, but new. So those are just a few examples, guys. Scheduling, revenue generation, cost efficiencies. And the last thing I'd say is it really strengthens everybody involved because we are tied together so formally, which we will be. There's a safety and security in a strength of numbers approach for our schools and our presidents. Yeah, it's two different conferences, and yeah, they're going to have their own seasons and championships and all those good things, but we're really working together. And so we know that we have what will start off as 15 schools working together towards a common goal, despite the fact that they're in two conferences. So those are some big, I think you can probably get into some weeds and find some other ancillary benefits along the way, but those are probably the big ones that help bring it together.
Yeah, I want to get into maybe how that all happened because it sounds great now that it's here, but to kind of get all of those different leaders to see that vision, probably a little bit harder said than done, or I know it's a lot harder said than done. So I do want to get into that. I want to not clear up, but ask you about one thing. I know Steve has a follow-up. And you mentioned kind of your existing Atlantic Sun members and what's going to be your new, because there was a bit of a shuffle here where all the football schools are going to be going to the United, that rebranded WAC.
Yep.
And then all of the non-football playing schools will be in the Atlantic Sun. I believe that you are now the executive director of this larger entity. What exactly, and you mentioned kind of how you can combine things, but what does that executive director role look like?
Well, I think my responsibility in that space, guys, is going to be to make sure that the consortium does all of the things that I just told you it's going to do.
Okay.
Right. So making sure we're bound together in a decision-making structure, making sure that we follow through on the scheduling and revenue generation plans that we have, manage membership as a whole. So again, while it's still two independent conferences in every way, shape, and form, each with their own decision-making structure built in as well, my job as exec director will be to make sure we continue to work together towards all those objectives. That's probably the simplest way to put it.
Sure. Okay, go ahead.
Well, first I want to say, you're describing your duties as executive director. Executive director is kind of a boring name, I would say. If you're the,
I don't think I'm a boring person either.
No. So I just have a suggestion. Maybe be super commissioner. Get a new nameplate for your desk. Since you're going to be over two different conferences, we'll call you, at least here on our show, we'll call you the super commissioner of the new consortium.
All right, fair enough, guys. I'll take
it. But I do have a serious question about the timing of this move as it relates to the overall just kind of ecosystem of college sports and college athletics. We have suggested on our show that with all these new changes, NIL becoming legal a few years ago, and now revenue share, basically the House settlements, creating this revenue share model, and probably some upcoming governance changes at the NCAA level. Did that create an atmosphere where this was important for you to do? We've talked about maybe smaller conferences, lower revenue conferences, kind of coming together to survive this new world and pooling their resources, like-minded schools. And so are we out in left field with that, or is that something that influenced this move? Do you think this move would have happened 10 years ago without the House settlement and this new structure?
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. I mean, you understand the industry, right? You're around it. You talk to people. You breathe it just like I breathe it, right? Just from different chairs. So you get it. You're right on point there. I mean, I'd say I don't want to repeat everything you just said, but I mean that the atmosphere that exists today, I think is a product of a few different things. Number one, COVID.
Yeah.
COVID made people comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And that is critical today to everything we do in college athletics. If I'm not comfortable being uncomfortable, I can't lead any organization, right? Just like anybody in our industry or many other industries too. So I think COVID really changed people's approach, which feeds into this even 4 or 5 years later. Two, house settlement, just like you said. We've had to learn to roll with some punches here, right? Revenue changing, decision making changing, the monetization of college athletics, which didn't exist, as you said, 10 years ago, right? So I think that has created a space for people to be not only comfortable with change like they were prepared to with COVID, but understanding that a lot's being driven around us. And at some point, you either are a domino that gets knocked over or you're a domino that knocks another domino over. And do you want to stand there and wait to get knocked over? Or do you want to try to be proactive and do something in the space to better situate yourself for the future? And new governance structures coming. We know a little bit about what that's going to, well, we know a lot about what that's going to look like, but it's certainly going to evolve over time. So this allows us to be much better situated to manage whatever comes out of that. If we ever have to, God forbid, down the road, be a little more independent in our operation, we're built to do that. We've built a model to be able to just transition and say, hey, we've got a structure, we've got an organization, we can go off and do what we need to do. And I'm being very hyperbolic in that, but I mean, yeah, I mean, all of these contributing factors are what has helped 30 people, guys, right? We had 30 people had to agree to do this. Think about that. 15 presidents, 15 athletic directors. I got good money that says the three of us couldn't decide where to have dinner tonight, right? So just think about the atmosphere. That's why you're spot on with that observation that you had to have an atmosphere that allowed people to think differently and be willing to do something different.
Well, we just talked about maybe the why in this new atmosphere, this new environment is help push them that way. You just talked about the who, the different players, 30 different people. I'd like to get to the how, like all of that's
Me
great.
too.
How did you get here? Because we sit here and again, you talk about, oh, can't we all work together and get along? You kind of mentioned that. But how did this happen for what you're able to share? I'm sure there's things that you can't, but how did we get here?
Yeah, well, it's just really complicated to share, right? Because this has just been an evolving conversation. And, I'm still a second year commissioner. I'm learning a lot every day myself. But one of the things that I've learned is that these things certainly don't happen overnight and they don't happen on the turn of one moment or another. They're a combination of things. And so, the way I would describe it is one, you have to have the atmosphere, as you just mentioned, which we do. Great. Two, we had a bunch of really unique circumstances. One is the pre-existing relationship between these two conferences. There's a trust level between these two conferences, and that is enhanced by the fact that my current role requires myself and Commissioner Ray at the WAC to both oversee the United Athletic Conference Football League. And so I have a pre-existing relationship with, Dr. Hurley at Tarleton and Dr. Schubert at ACU and Dr. Cowley at UT Arlington over time as well. So, having those relationships baked in was critical because otherwise you're people that don't know each other trying to do something brand new. So that was a huge factor in this equation. And quite frankly, the WAC circumstance. I mean, the fact that the members had been leaving the league and that pushed, the three schools that are now left in that league to think a little bit differently about the future, provided the platform. So those are just a few things that helped it come to fruition. And then it evolves over time. You talk to people, you learn more about each other, you start thinking about things differently, you start offering ideas. You certainly we all talk about membership in Division One quite often, and where do we want to be and how do we want to get there. So it's just been an evolving process. It probably, if you really want to go back in time, it probably goes back a year, year and a half in time.
Mhm.
Just when you think about the evolution of those relationships in particular. Now, the discussions on this particular structure, those probably, ramped up in speed and real thought probably over the winter, into early 2025. And so over the course of the last, I don't know exactly, guys, 4 to 6 months, it's probably taken real shape over the course of that time. But, it didn't really take off until all of the players involved understood the landscape where they were going to be, especially on the WAC side of things and understanding who was staying, who was going. I'm so glad that the Utah schools found an awesome home because that was critical. I think to the credit of Dr. Hurley and all of those on the WAC side, it was critical to make sure that whatever happened, everybody landed in a really good place. And from my perspective on the outside looking in, and now someone on the inside, I couldn't be happier to see all the institutions that were in that league before, find new homes, and I think really good homes, and then allow the Texas schools that we're now partnered with to do something really cool.
Well, and I think that's well said. When you look at where things are at here, well, I want to say today, but in 2026, when this all actually plays out, versus maybe the unknowns 6 to 12 months ago, to hear that kind of everybody wanted what was best, for each other, and that okay, maybe we're not going to be together anymore as the WAC. But we all have landing spots, for lack of a better term, and I don't mean that negatively in any way, because I think, as you said, where the Utah schools are headed are great for those institutions as well. But I think if somebody said to you, "Hey, the WAC's going to be rebranded as the United," and I think there'd be a lot of negative connotations. I think when you sit here today, you're like, "Man, I don't know if it could have gotten much better than that." So that's the great point. Yeah.
Yeah, and the rebrand, guys, is just a product of the new face of the franchise, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's a new membership constituency. It now faces much more east than west, and so that became a natural transition. And then when you think about the fact that all 7 of our football schools who currently play in the UAC are going to be in the WAC/UAC moving forward, that was one of the actually more easier, I think, decisions that we had to make along the way.
Okay.
So, a follow-up question on that, and I don't know how much you'll be able to say about this, but the how you decided instead of to just reform into one conference and instead you're keeping two conferences alive and building this consortium or alliance. Um, I suggested we talked about this last week when the news hit.
Yeah.
I said I think it's a brilliant business strategy. As the WAC had faced troubles, one of their biggest assets was that they're recognized as a conference. They have that auto qual bid, which is worth so much money with the NCAA tournament and how the shares are paid out and all that kind of stuff. So I think to me, I think it was a brilliant move the way you did it, shifting schools over, the football schools, the non-football schools, and instead of just creating one entity, you still have the two auto qualifiers. Can you speak to that at all? How that decision was made? I mean, who came up with that idea? I just thought the WAC was going to die on the vine. They looked like a dying conference, but what you've created is you still have two very healthy conferences with a big overall alliance.
Well, in terms of developing the idea, I think that's a credit to a number of people, right? That again, we're really thought leaders in that space. So it's probably a wide collection of folks that ultimately, but led by our presidents. I mean, I got to tell you guys, I mean, I came to the Atlantic Sun a couple years ago, largely because of the presidents that are in this league and how spectacular they are. And even the new presidents that have come into our league over the last couple of years are just incredible thought leaders. And very much the same with the 3 presidents in the Texas schools that we're now working together with. And so, I could sit here and try to take credit for this, that, and the other thing, but the real credit goes to those presidents who understand what's best for their institutions and how to position themselves for the future. So that's probably a vague commissionary thing to say, but it really is the truth, that it's a credit to them in terms of kind of fully executing it. In the 2 leagues, I also credit the presidents for this, which is there's, the WAC's been around since 1960 something, right? I mean, between the two leagues, we've got over 100 years of history. And that matters. And so, walking away or rebranding the WAC to the UAC is not, I said it was an easy decision because it came naturally in terms of the brand. But, walking away from the WAC brand is not in of itself an easy decision. So let me be kind of clear about that. And so honoring the legacy of the league. I mean, the Atlantic Sun has changed names. It used to be the TAC for a long time. The Summit used to be the MidCon. I mean, name changes are not completely out of the norm in our world, but they are rare. And so I think it was important, if possible, especially obviously for the presidents from the Texas schools, to try to preserve some level of legacy of the league, even though through a new brand, it still carries with it that WAC history and that WAC tradition, which is an important thing, I think, for them. And I think that's a recognized important thing for the presidents on the Atlantic Sun side as well.
Yeah, when you look at the WAC, I mean, the history of the WAC, you're talking BYU, TCU. I mean, the list goes on in there,
Utah.
Arizona. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and list them all, but there's a ton of massive universities that at one point in time were a member of the WAC. So I think it's great how that's kind of trying to, you're being respectful for that history for both the current members and potentially past members there. You talk membership. I mean, everything we're really talking about here is membership, maneuvering membership and all that kind of stuff. Of course, conference realignment is never ending. I'm sure you have been like so busy with what's been going on. You're just happy maybe for a breath of fresh air. But is the Atlantic Sun, the UAC, this whole alliance? I mean, you guys feel, I think, pretty good. I think it's one has 7, one has 8 members right now. I can't remember which is which. I apologize, but I would think 15. You mentioned that earlier. I mean, that is a healthy conference. So I would assume that right now you guys are obviously still watching the landscape, but you're pretty comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't we're where we need to be in order to execute the vision and the plan for sure. And so yeah, I think the general answer is yes, we're comfortable. I've said on a couple of interviews in the last couple of days, I mean, we are going to explore growth if that makes sense for us. We'll see what that looks like and if and how that comes to fruition. So I would be very clear that I don't know that our intention long term is to remain at, will be 7 on the ASUN side and 8 on the UAC side. It might be, that might be where we land for good reason, but I think exploring or at least listening to opportunities for folks that might be interested, we're open to that as we go. And but we also don't want to, part of the reason we're doing this is at our level in particular, no one wants to be in a league with 24 teams. And as you mentioned or alluded to, at least one AQ, so our growth potential at the mid-major level of Division One is somewhat limited because the vast majority of us are traditionally at least one bid leagues, not that we don't aspire to more. So I don't know that we're looking to get huge, and I don't know that we're just opening the doors here and saying, come on in. That's not what I'm saying. But I think if we have opportunities to expand that align and make sense, we feel like we're really aligned right now, guys. You know what I mean? And that was a big part of this was we've gotten misaligned in a lot of Division One, and now we feel like, man, we've really situated ourselves in an aligned space. So we want to be really thoughtful. If someone came knocking on the door and said, "Hey, I'm really interested," we'd listen, but we want to make sure that, hey, are you really aligned with what we've just done? And do you understand what we've just done? And are you going to uphold the mission of what we're trying to accomplish and all those kinds of things? So we're good and we'll see.
Well, you hear a lot of those words in conference realignment when you're talking about one school going to another conference. But what you guys did here is absolutely innovative, bold. The alignment of your schools. I mean, this probably takes the cake here for conference realignment in truly being innovative in everything that you guys did here in this strategic alliance. So, congratulations to you and your presidents and your institutions. It looks phenomenal. We'll continue to follow this, and we thank you so much for giving some time to us.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate the time and the interest, guys. And by the way, for what it's worth, it's really satisfying to hear the excitement come from you guys too, because ultimately this is about student athletes and fans and supporters of what we're doing. We're just the people moving the pieces around behind the scenes. So honestly, I'm really glad to hear that you guys are excited about it, that you guys see the vision behind it, and now we just gotta, follow through on what we promised.
I have no doubt you will. Thanks so much for joining us.
You got it, guys. Thanks.
Again, we thank Commissioner Bacon for joining us here on the Big Mountain. Lots of good stuff that he gave us here, Steve. What are your thoughts on that discussion?
Well, it was a great discussion. It's great to hear from, the person behind the scenes that's leading the decision makers.
Yeah.
And my thoughts just go back to kind of what we talked about last week.
Yeah.
I thought this was a brilliant move. Instead of just a simple merger of conferences, they basically did a large scale corporate restructuring to basically keep two conferences alive and healthy. So they keep their two auto quals, but they also bring 15 schools together that have like-minded, similar interests, pool their resources. So to me, just an overall brilliant move from the business standpoint.
Yeah.
We'll see how the competition works out in the leagues and everything. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see where this goes. And I do think we've talked about this many times in the new world of, post-house settlement. We have governance changes coming up, revenue share. I think for some of the lower revenue schools and conferences, things like this are important for their survival as they move forward. These guys together, these 15 schools have come together and to me pulled off a coup, a brilliant move to set themselves up for the future. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of copycats moving forward.
Sure. Well, we kind of knew when we talked about last week the what was happening. My interest here was how did this happen? Because this is a massive, as you said, restructuring or change of landscape or whatever you want to call it, and it's a really big deal. And Commissioner here really talked about the alignment of all these schools, the trust that they had to have, which is somewhat kind of hard to find these days when it's an every man for themselves mentality type of deal in these conference realignments. So that alignment that they could all get together. And again, you hear these words innovative and bold a lot, but this takes the cake, man. Like there's nobody more innovative than what these 15 schools did. Yes, there's other partnerships. I know we've had other partnerships and stuff, but to do what they did is to me, it's just on a different level, and it's great to see.
Absolutely. And I would say my kind of final thought is, went from over the last 2 weeks, looking at what we thought was the death of the WAC, this long historic conference, long history, which was kind of depressing,
Sure. Yeah.
And it went from that to now creating this new entity, which I'm excited about.
Yeah.
I think, and especially the way they've done it, where they're sorting the football schools, the non-football schools, but all coming together in an innovative way. I think it's a lot more. So we went from kind of a depressing, we're going to watch the WAC die off, to now they've created this awesome new thing that fans should be really excited about.
Absolutely. I think it's absolutely exciting. And you look at some of the schools, and as he mentioned, there's a shift of schools. So some of the schools that had been in the ASUN are now going to be in the UAC. That's where the football members lie. And so, I think there's a lot of excitement, a lot of things to like about it.
My biggest question is how does this affect other conferences? Do they see this? And we can even see it at the power level. We've heard talk of Big East with the PAC. What if the ACC loses 2 to 6 big members? Do they come up with something with the Big 12?
Right.
I think there's a possibility this could be precedent setting in the world of college athletics.
Well, there you have it. And again, we appreciate Commissioner Bacon joining us here. Great conversation. You all know that we bring you these firsthand decision maker interviews. We'll continue to do so, and we're going to be taking a trip to Vegas here very soon, enjoying the Mountain West Media Day. So stay tuned for that. Hey, make sure you give this one a like and subscribe if you like our content, and we'll see you next time on the Big Mountain.